Welcome to our very first Fridays with Dr. Debbie. I'm so glad that you're here. This is really about you. It's about getting to know who you are and the things that concern you and helping you come up with some options for how to live a better life and enjoy your love even more. That's really what I'm all about, is the romance of life. There are lots of different ways that you can grow, but if you're not growing in your relationship, if you're not growing in your marriage, then this is the place to be for that. That's what we're really going to focus on here. And just having said the word focus, that's the topic for today. So I'd like for you just to pause for a moment and think about, what is the biggest concern that you have right now in your marriage? Okay. You think about that for a minute and maybe just go ahead and jot it down. I'll give you just a second to do that. It could just be a word or two. But then I want you to think about the angle that you're coming at that from. What is that focus that you have on that particular challenge that you're having right now? Is the focus, most of the time it is, on the other person and what the other person needs to change, or how the other person isn't pleasing you? When you focus on the other person, you're always looking, well, most of us look at what's wrong with that person. Why are they behaving that way? I want them to behave this way. And we start to pray about it. Lord, change my spouse. Lord, make my spouse more available, make my spouse more communicative, make them more affectionate, make them come home on time, make them help out around the house more. There's all kinds of things that we can think about that we want to have changed about our spouse. And I understand that, because I tend to get pulled in that direction too. It's a lot easier to focus on what the other person is not doing or what the other person is doing wrong. Now, today, my audience is predominantly female. Actually, it's completely female. So I'm going to address this in terms of what husbands are perceived to need to change to be better husbands. So chances are, ladies, that's what you wrote down. You wrote down something that you think your husband needs to change. In reality, almost every couple that came to see me in my private practice, that was the goal: fix my husband. Now, husbands tended to like working with me because I helped them find a voice about what they were thinking and feeling and why they were doing the things they were doing. What do we do, ladies? We are actually either reacting to his avoidance or to his even anger. And that, when it puts us in that reactive mode, we're looking at what needs to be fixed. Now, if you've got a good relationship, then you can actually respond to his leadership. And that's pretty cool. So there's a difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is you're just going completely with your immediate emotions, and you're probably in attack mode, fix mode, correct mode, some sort of a defensive mode, because things are not going well. If you're following, if you know where your husband's going, if you know what his intentions are, if you understand what he's thinking, what he's feeling, and why he's wanting to do what he's wanting to do, makes it a lot easier to follow him, right? But men often don't do that. They often don't share with us what it is that they're up to, right? So we immediately go into this mode of, wow, this is not good, because we pick up on those vibes. We're very emotionally sensitive, and we can tell when our spouse is pulled away from us, and we start to think the worst. Now, as we start to think the worst, guess what happens? Our anxiety goes up. It goes through the roof. It gets worse and worse, which makes us even more reactive. Now, we don't want to be reactive. We want to be proactive. And I teach this to the men all the time. Be proactive. You are in charge. And I'm going to tell you, ladies, you're in charge of you too. You know, you are the chief operating officer of your family. You need to be in partnership with your CEO. Now, some women are the CEO themselves, and I totally understand that. If you know my story, my husband left and I had 3 boys to raise by myself. So I had to, in all aspects, become both the CEO and the COO, which sounds really funny, the chief operating officer. So I understand that if that's where you are, if you don't have a spouse. But if you're wanting to draw a spouse in, then there are certain things that you can do that will put you in that direction to go. And one of those is to not be reactive, instead to be proactive. Now, being proactive simply means that you take a step back and you go, what's really going on here? What's really happening? You know, I married this guy because I adored him. I married him because he was cute. That's a good one too. Not enough, but it's good. But you also married him because you thought you were going to go somewhere together. And now he's not telling you where he's going. So the question you want to ask yourself is, why is he not telling me what's going on? What is happening that's keeping him from sharing with me what is bothering him? Now, I got to tell you, sometimes women do not want to know, and men pick up on those vibes. You know, men don't want to tell their wives what's bothering them because for 2 reasons, basically. Number one, he doesn't want to hurt your feelings if it has something to do with you. And number 2, he doesn't want to make you angry, because an angry wife is just not, it's just not where he wants to go. You know, he gets enough anger and aggression in the world just being male as it is. So he's looking to you for something different. Now, I'm not saying he doesn't need to change. I believe he probably does. I mean, we all could use some improvement, right? So what is it that's keeping him from being improved? What is it that's getting in his way? What is he afraid of? What is getting in his way of talking? And you can only know that by starting to study men in general. No, they're not all alike, but they do have some very common characteristics. And that's what I created a Wise Woman's Guide to Men in Marriage for, is to help you understand what those differences are. So let's back up here for a second. You've got a man that you're crazy about. He's adorable. You really wanted to go somewhere with him, and now he's just behaving in ways that you don't understand. So the first point you want to take is to back up and go, what's really going on here? What is he reacting to? And then come around the other side and try to see it from his point of view. Now that's hard to do, especially when you're flooded with your own emotions. When you're flooded with your own emotions, then you get to take a step back and look at those too. Are your expectations realistic? Are you taking a shot in the dark? Are you simply reacting to anything and everything? Let's say that he stopped talking to you. What's going on with him? Chances are he's got a lot of emotion going on inside of him. As you let him know, and you want to do it in a way that's non-intrusive, because if you start to be intrusive about wanting to know what's going on with him, he will feel attacked, blamed, criticized, and throw up a wall. And he's already in a cave, and you don't want him to barricade the door, okay? So you can say to him simply, gosh, it seems like you've got something on your mind. I'm here if you want to talk about it. And then drop the subject and go on about the day. Keeping in mind that something is probably bothering him and watching for ways that he begins to reach out to you to talk about what's bothering him. And when he does, you want to make sure that you don't interrupt the flow. Let him talk. And when he pauses, you pause with him. You wait with him until something else comes up. The other piece of advice here that I have for you is let your words be few. When you are in the middle of trying to get your husband to talk, you need to do more listening. You need to let him know that you hear what he says, but don't offer your feedback. He just needs you to be there. If he wants your feedback, he'll say, "What do you think?" But you don't want to offer that up front. At some point during that conversation, if you want to, you could say to him, I have some thoughts on that. But then don't tell him what they are. Let him ask. It will actually make your impact so much more powerful. It will keep that wall, it'll keep the barricade from going back up. Because at the end of the day, ladies, men are way more sensitive than we are. And they're sensitive to attack, blame, and criticism in ways that you and I don't understand. So really important. So that's the focus of what needs to improve about your husband. That's where that is. Okay. In terms of understanding what's going on inside of him and how you can begin to draw him out if he's ready, if he's willing. When you've got an issue with your husband, where do you place your focus? And oftentimes we place that focus on what's wrong with him and what he needs to change. However, what I've noticed over the years is that we often have a very complementary problem to whatever it is his problem is. Okay. So if he tends to be silent, our problem may be that we talk too much. Whatever it is, we need to figure out how we can be more brave, more confident, and full of wisdom in our own lives. So changing that focus from what's wrong with him to what could I be working on? What are the issues that I need to improve about who I am? And let your focus be there instead. That's really powerful. And I've learned so much about myself just by using that process, because it's very easy for me, especially as a psychologist, for years, just focusing on the other person and what they needed to change. So in my own relationship, that tendency is still there. I think it's honestly there for most women anyway. But when I pull back and I go, okay, wait a minute. He's doing this. What am I doing? Because there's some growth that needs to take place for me too. And one of those huge pieces for me personally has been confidence. Being confident that I am the type of person that's worthy of being pursued, that I don't have to be the one to go after what I need, but instead, by being a stronger woman, being more of who God created me to be, that I could actually attract instead of attack. Now, how cool is that? If I'm growing and I'm being who God created me to be more and more, I'm more kind, I'm more gentle, I'm more peaceful, I'm more joyful, I'm more real, not just with all the good stuff, but when I talk about the things that bother me, I can be honest. I don't have to be dramatic or manipulative. I can just be relaxed and be confident in who God created me to be, and be confident in my own process. I think those are things all of us women could be working on. The deal is, if you focus on telling God what needs to be fixed about your husband, you miss this whole opportunity to improve yourself. I had a friend years ago who, she and her husband weren't doing well together. They hadn't actually done well together most of their marriage. And she was constantly praying for him to change. And when they finally got into counseling together, she didn't want to be part of it. She was done with him. And the very thing she had been praying for all along was, I want my husband to change. And now he was willing, but she had to face the fact that she needed to make some changes too. She didn't like that. She was stuck in a mindset of, it's not my problem. Another couple, she was so convinced that her husband was the only one with a problem that she refused to do any of the exercises that I had for them to do. I had workbooks and things I was taking them through, but she reasoned I wouldn't do what I do if he wasn't doing what he's doing. So there was no sense of personal responsibility for her own personal growth. As far as she was concerned, she was perfect. It doesn't work that way. We're not perfect. None of us are perfect. We all have space to grow. Now, that brings me to my final point, which is, if you really want to have an upgraded husband, your focus needs to be not on his upgrade, but on your own. Because an upgraded husband is going to need an upgraded wife. Otherwise, you're just going to pull him right back into that negative cycle that you've always done, which is the foundation of Al-Anon. Most people are familiar with AA. For folks who have problems with alcohol, in particular, is the way it started. What would happen is the men would get out of treatment and they'd go home, and their family system, their wife, had not changed. They had stayed exactly the same. And in that interaction between the cycles that they had co-created together, then became perpetuated all over again. They started up again and actually pulled them in right back into the same responses they had before, because their wives were responding to them the same way they always had. So that's the issue. So we want to make sure that the upgraded husband is getting an upgraded wife. I hope that makes sense.